I have a recurring nightmare. I'm working in TV again as a host and anchor. That was my life for 9 years, and it apparently burned a strong psychological memory. I'm late for the start of the news show. The show starts at the top of the hour, and I'm barely going to be there in time. On time would be in place at least 5 minutes early. I'm getting there just as the show starts. I'm not ready. I'm a bit out of breath, mainly anxiety. Pretty sure my forehead is shiny. Oh, I'll just get through it. Then suddenly, the nightmare gets dark. The prompter has broken. I don't know my scripts, and I'm on camera. Now, did this really happen? Sure, a variation of it a couple of times. Ultimately, I got through those few moments. I did know my scripts, or I managed to fake my way into the first piece of recorded video that we could play. But that nightmare, with very slight changes, I've experienced that, I would say, at least 24 times, even though my TV days are now 20 years behind me. Today, on Stories and Strategies, our most frightening moments in our communications careers. My name is Doug Downs, and happy to have two recurring guests on the podcast today. Jolene Ondrik in Calgary. Hey, Jolene.
Hey, Doug. Good to see you.
Good to see you and hear you. Yeah. Jolene, you're an independent consultant specializing in culture and communications. You help businesses with culture assessments, plans and implementation, communication strategies, and customized workshops, providing coaching to teams and leaders. And great to have you back. And Doug Lacombe, joining from the Ottawa area, also second time on the podcast. Hey, Doug.
Greetings. I'm in the booming metropolis of Baynesville, Ontario. So roughly what I see is the St. Lawrence River and a bunch of leaves. But it's a beautiful day here in beautiful downtown Baynesville. So there.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot of motorcades go through there, but it probably the traffic light flashes yellow for a little while when that's happening.
It's
right?
where the PM stops for gas on the way to Montreal. That's it. Yeah,
probably. Doug, you're a senior digital marketing and PR professional with 33 years experience in media, web publishing, software publishing systems, telecom, and newswire services. You have a BA in psychology and an MBA from the University of Saskatchewan. So, I'll throw it open here. This is about nightmares in public relations, and we've all had them. As I described off the opening there, that recurring nightmare that I honestly still have, the idea of the prompter breaking down, did that hit a thread for either one of you? Have you had something similar like that?
Oh, man. Well, it's funny because my first thought was this is like all my university buddies dream or have nightmares about going to a final and not having studied or attended any classes.
Yes.
That's actually how I got through university. So that really didn't matter to me. I didn't have that nightmare. But as soon as you talked about nightmares, and even though it's not strictly PR related, in 2000, I was working for a software company in California. And I did product marketing for web publishing systems. This was a editorial and advertising newspaper systems company, and we went over to Amsterdam to this big trade show. I think it originally was a photographic trade show, and then became all things printing, and. So we get to Amsterdam. We go out for a couple of days for sales prep. The equipment arrives, and we come back to Amsterdam so that we can go to the conference center. And word gets back to us that one of the tech guys, wonderful guy, super talented, but he inadvertently copied the blank hard drive onto the demo hard drive instead of the reverse.
No.
So we're left with these two blank hard drives. And of course, panic ensues, and we're all milling about, like, lemmings or something. And so what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And at the time, internet was way too slow to do a transatlantic FTP. So we tried it a couple of times, couldn't bring anywhere near the data over. So we couldn't clone it, couldn't bring it over. So as it turned out, our CEO was coming over the next morning on the plane. And coincident with all that was the fact that the company really needed money. We had a liquidity problem. And so we were looking for investors. And there was this group of potential investors from Switzerland that were coming by at the trade show specifically to evaluate our advertising and editorial systems. And with a brief nod to the web publishing system that I was in charge of, to assess whether they wanted to invest money in the company. And so the CEO wasn't going to get there until an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours after these guys were showing up for their appointment. And so we had nothing but blank hard drives and dead monitors in the back. And everybody's freaking out. And they're like, well, Doug, you got to carry the football
and were you presenting in English or were you presenting in a different language, by the way?
No, these guys hardly spoke English. And so I had to trot out my seriously brutal French. And the thing about my French, I mean, I worked in Montreal in 1987, so I had a little bit. But, in that era, I didn't learn any computer words. So I don't know what Ethernet is. I don't know any of the publishing word. I don't have the vocabulary to do this dog and pony in front of these Swiss guys. And, one of them is like, and they're so polite, so European, so Swiss. They're like, when do you think we might see the editorial system? I'm like, oh, that's after this web publishing thing, which is going to knock your socks off. And I strung it along for 90 of the most painful moments. Thank God my deodorant worked because I was sweating like a whatever. And at the end of it, I said, and now let's go see the editorial system. And these guys looked so relieved to be rid of me, and I was so relieved to be rid of them. But I'll tell you, I never tap danced so darn fast in my whole life. It was it was a pretty intense little session, and so we went for drinks later.
No kidding, lots, big glasses. Jolene, how about you? Biggest nightmare that you've had?
Biggest nightmare. I think, how about the classic nightmare, which is the spelling mistakes?
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, I haven't had the classic communications one with the L missing out of the word public.
Yes,
that one has not happened to me.
I have.
It happens. And I think that giving ourselves a little bit of grace, and I was working for a company and we were going through a restructure. So imagine all the time, energy, and effort placed into preparing for this restructure and the announcement of it and what was happening. And I was in charge of change and communications for this activity. And as communicators do, we write the messages for the executive vice presidents, and that was my job. And of course, before he gets it, you have 8,000 people looking at this document, writing, rewriting, all of those pieces. He gives me his edits, I get him in, and we're good to go. We push the button. And then relief until the dreaded email comes in that says, there's a spelling mistake, Jolene, from the executive vice president. And you have that sinking feeling, right?
And this has gone out already.
It's out? Gone. This is gone to the masses. So the sinking feeling of the spelling mistake. And you're thinking, okay, it's not that bad. So I open up the email and it says, look at the last sentence. That's all it says. So I'm like, okay, what did I do? So I open up the email. So this email is coming out of time of people potentially getting laid off. This is the scenario and the situation happening. And the last sentence should have the word exciting in it. And it says, this is an exiting time.
Yes.
For the organization.
Why do these things always have a second meaning?
And of course. So here I am, mortified by this happening. New executive vice president. This is his first experience of my communication. So I'm on the phone with IT. What can we do to pull this back? How can we get this email and fix it? Figure this all out. Email him back and I say, hey, we have the ability to pull this back. Most people haven't probably opened this yet. We can pull it back. And he said, you know what, Jolene? Chalk this up to a learning.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, couldn't believe it.
Wow.
It was awful. And so I would go into people's offices and they would have this email up on their bulletin board with the word exiting highlighted. Highlighted. Like, you are so mean to me. And you know you've sent out stuff with spelling mistakes. And this one just, it got me. It got me right
I hear you, because I've submitted resumes and gotten the job because I'm so good with pubic engagement. I don't know how, but...
Can you elaborate on which organizations those were?
That's right. We need a list.
We need to know what the role was.
I thought this interview was going a little, crazy here.
Sideways, yeah.
Oh, man.
This is now I really am in horror.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and Doug, you have one where something went out the door, and it even more than really a news release, right? This had the Securities Commission and market timing and all that. What happened there?
Yeah. Well, I was many years ago. I was working for a newswire company, and of course, with investor relations, you get financials, and you get the news release about the financials and all that stuff well in advance, and it's held in embargo so that it doesn't disrupt the markets. And I'm not sure if we were dealing with a brand new editorial system down east at that time. I think it coincided with that, but my memory's a bit foggy. But somebody hit the wrong button. Basic human error, not a crazy thing, no malicious intent. And the French version of this, of Petro-Canada's financials, went out and showed on the website for like 20 minutes or something.
But it's only the French version, right? Nobody actually reads that, do they?
Exactly, yeah. Except all of Eastern Canada and every reporter. And and so this gets picked up by this bilingual journalist. And so now, of course, it's hit the news. And
the markets are still open, right? The markets are still going.
The markets are open. It's like mid-afternoon. I'm in the Foothills Hospital with my wife at the migraine clinic, trying to sort through like whatever migraine treatments. And my phone rings, and it's a good buddy of mine, or who became a good buddy of mine. She was on the Petrocan end, and she's like, hey, this thing happened. I'm like, what? And, it had nothing to do with her and barely anything to do with me. But so now I'm pacing up and down the halls like one of these crazed executives, on the phone. What the hell happened with a financial release? Like I'm some kind of Wall Street somebody. And I'm just freaking out. And so we had to call the Alberta Stock Exchange, the TSX. We had to call all the regulatory authorities. The Newswire had to take accountability. We had to get our president to visit their president. I mean, it was so intense that I can honestly say that was probably the one and only time in my career where I thought, like, I was scared. I thought, does this involve jail time?
So then someone has to look at the market impact too, right? Because bottom line is we have a system in Canada, as in a lot of countries, where financial information is released before market open or after market close to prevent, avid traders from making some quick bucks. Somebody has to review and put a dollar to what was the dollar impact. Roughly, what would be the dollar impact of that kind of mistake? Are we talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, more?
Oh, it could have been millions, right? I mean, I think the germane, the math essentially is how much did the the actual results deviate from the expected results that the market had already factored into the pricing the previous day. And then, was there a deviance? And if there was, then the calculus begins, and that could be in the tens of millions. It could be whatever. So, in this particular case, I recall that, well, first of all, when we phoned regulatory authorities or regulatory affairs, whatever they're called, and said, hey, stop trading. And because, somebody could have taken advantage of what effectively amounted to inside information, right? And it was a real big schmozzle. And thank goodness it didn't have a material impact on Petro-Canada's stock or their earnings or the market in general. But it caused enough kerfuffle and enough brand and reputation damage to the newswire to sting for a good long time. And there was a big overhaul in operations to put additional checks and balances in place after that debacle.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's the mop and bucket. Let's clean it up. Our favorite thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Does stuff keep you guys awake at night sometimes? Like I remember when I got out of the media, and of course my first role in PR was to be a media spokesperson, which was the model back then. You don't kind of do that much anymore. But after I'd given an interview, even if I was 100% confident, I hit my notes, there was nothing unexpected, I wouldn't really sleep well until the newspaper came out the following day. This is how old I am, but I would stay up. And is there stuff that keeps you guys awake with your heart just pounding on a regular basis like that?
I think more for me is the sage advice of experience not being taken, I think is what keeps me up at night. And I think of a story of a simple little coloring book that got a little bit big. And the idea of, So I was working for an organization that had stakeholder relations as part of it. And what they created was a coloring book to keep kids busy at open houses. So pretty simple. You've got a coloring book. There was a dinosaur, so it happened to be an oil and gas company. There's a bit of a miss there. Dinosaurs aren't oil and gas. That's fine.
They're
it's
not?
A coloring book.
I thought plastic dinosaurs were...
What?
I guess I can put my cauldron away then. I know since boiling those buggers up. Yeah.
Can't forget that. Yeah. And so this coloring book is exactly what you would expect. There's a character inside of it that goes through a story. It is oil and gas related. There's rainbows. There's all those beautiful things, what kids would get excited about. So this coloring book is inside of the organization, and they had one for their conventional gas and one for their shale gas, and the character had a name. And this coloring book ends up somehow being picked up in the blogosphere. So imagine this is 12 years ago when Facebook was just kind of getting started. We didn't have the social media that we had, but blogs were a big deal. So you had some influencers in the blog world, and this coloring book starts to generate in the blogosphere as it goes around. And as all good big companies do, they have it's just a coloring book method, and let's ignore it and it'll go away because it's blogs. Like what could possibly happen there? So it starts to spin in the blogosphere. And then mainstream media picks it up, which means like your big TV news channels, your radio stations starts to pick this up.
Game on.
And lo and behold, before you know it, it gets picked up by the Colbert Report. So Stephen Colbert gets his hands on this coloring book and spends a glorious 7 minutes talking about this coloring book and how oil and gas creates rainbows and how all of these pieces are going on. And in the meantime, the company has pulled the coloring book from the website. Right. It no longer exists, right? People have copies. Like, it's an old memory on websites. And the best part about what Colbert did is not only did he talk about the coloring book, but he added pages to the coloring book. And had what was happening to the coloring book. Somebody ends up blowing themselves up, going to heaven. It's this whole beautiful, like, just awful rendition of everything that you're seeing there, just shaking your head going, oh no, I can't believe it. And the news clips are, it's just a coloring book. And all of this non-serious stuff gets into the media and mainstream.
Yeah.
And it's one of those times as a communicator where you can see the end of what could possibly happen with this simple coloring book. And you just sit there saying, you want to say I told you so, but you're busy with the mop and the bucket.
Somebody had, because the coloring book, as you were telling that story, I'm thinking, that's actually a cool idea. Kids want to color, open house, kids want to do stuff, occupy the kid. I thought that sounded great, but the point being, it was very Maudlin-esque how they portrayed an industry that rightly or wrongly is in the crosshairs a lot, right? They missed the point.
Yeah. Well, missed the point, and I think there's a missed opportunity too. I think from a company perspective, when you think, how do we deal with risk communications or crisis communications, could have been, hey, you know what? Oil and gas development is a serious topic. This is made for children. Let's have a conversation. We could have opened up the door and really invited people in to have this conversation versus hoping that nothing would happen with it. And I think that's where that missed opportunity is how do we take something like this and slow it down or even stop it from getting into, you're not taking oil and gas development seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really not reading the room. And unfortunately, not everybody is attuned to, the ears of the public in the way that professional communicators are. And so, you can tell them all you want, this isn't going to land well. And they're like, why? It's a coloring book. And I can imagine the debrief meeting. We should have gone with the unicorn. I told you we should have gone with the unicorn.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Okay. Horrible bosses, because everybody has a horrible boss story. And if you've been a consultant your whole time, you definitely have a horrible client story. I'll go first. Mine was, this is a while ago now. I was working for a boss I genuinely did not like. Not only as a boss, our personalities just didn't click well. And one day they were out of town and they called me. I guess I was sort of their right hand, which is problem one, and said, oh, that staff member, one of their direct reports, they wanted me to go for coffee with them and tell them they're fired. And
classy.
Well, so I did. And the person I was conveying the news to did not take it well. They didn't get angry. They just got very upset at the news and had to just walk away. So I was more than a little upset at having to do this, which years later, I'm even more, that's wrong. That's unprofessional. Secondly, I kind of think my boss timed this on purpose because they didn't want to do it.
Oh yeah, that's a duck and cover for sure. And a cheap shot to leave you holding the bag. Because I've always thought, in not that I've had huge leadership roles, but I thought you can look people in the eye and tell them what's happening and just be decent and honest and try and give them as soft a landing as you can. And to basically subcontract that to somebody on the whim is just incredibly rude. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And leaving you completely unprepared.
Yeah.
I think for, hey, go deal with this. It's going to be hard, but good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, and I didn't really have the backstory to what precipitated all of this, all the little nuances and what about this and what about this. But
let me check my notes. You're fired because reason. All right, fine. Get out of here.
Yeah.
It's how
you just send me an email.
Yeah,
it would have been better.
That's right. Exactly. Fired by email. Yeah. Wow. When that's the upgrade, that's brutal.
Horrible bosses? Have you come across?
Too many, I think, I think I've had some horrible bosses, and I've also, I think, seen some horrible bosses. And one of them is, speaking of email or telling people things that aren't quite right, is I know of an organization, so it's not a boss that I had. They were outsourcing their entire IT department to another country.
Ooh.
And the way that the entire IT department found out was the boss sitting in his car via a video chat, a video meeting, saying, we're outsourcing the entire IT department out of the country. And you're not going to have a job FYI. And the worst possible way that you can tell people their job is changing or they don't have a job is that way.
So casual.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. That actually, that made me think just of I guess I must have had PTSD and suppressed this memory until just now. But I was one of the lucky folks that got into what was affectionately referred to in Saskatchewan as Black Friday. In the newspapers, I was working at the Saskatoon Star Phoenix at the time, and it was shortly after Conrad Black and David Radler, or Rattler as we like to call him, took over the newspapers, and they did a mass firing. And the way that they did it was they called us into a meeting on Saturday, which was clearly unusual, and we all had to go to the Delta Besbro. And it was all set up like conference style. So, here's a table for people with last names A to M, and then, N to whatever, and so on. So you go up to the table where, in my case, the L's were, and they're like, okay, you're in ballroom 3 or whatever. There were 4 ballrooms. And so now you're in this ballroom, and of course your spider sense is tingling like crazy. And you're trying to figure out, am I in a loser ballroom or am I in a good ballroom? and at the time it was a very family oriented newspaper, I guess, and so there were a lot of siblings and cousins and children and parents working at the paper. And so even if you didn't lose your job, somebody down the hall was probably related to you, and so there was a lot of drama. And anyway, so I'm in my room with whatever it was, 80, 90 other people or something. And they tasked this poor production manager, great guy, good friend, to get up there. And I mean, you could see the pain coming off his face in having to say this. And so he read the script that he'd been given and had, been forced to deliver. And there was silence for it felt like 10 minutes, but I'm sure it was 30 seconds. And then finally somebody at the back of the room asked what to the rest of us was the obvious question. They had not made it clear if we had lost our jobs or not. And so it's the one lone voice from the wilderness is like, So do we have jobs? And they're like, oh yeah, everybody in this room is good. And it was like, and there's like, oh shit. Well, who are the victims down the hall? Oh my God. Yeah. It was so intense. It was just ridiculous. Yeah, that was a serious shotgun approach that Conrad Black was famous for.
Just real quick, because we're short on time. From these stories, whether it's an exiting day at the company or pubic relations or the financials that are released during the market hour, what do you, now that these are a bit behind and who knows what's ahead, everything's going to be okay? What do you take from all of that? Jolene, first to you.
I think it's stuff happens. And you can prepare, you can have people read things, you can go through a lot of things, and it happens. And I think the piece is, A, giving yourself some grace that these things happen to the best of us, and B, having a plan to how can you clean this up and fix it up, because inevitably something is going to happen that you have to figure out. And trying to be more adaptable and flexible about how you can focus and approach these things, I think, is the best way for any of us to really think about, stuff happens. How am I going to deal with it if it does? And just preparing yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, to embellish that really, or to add to it is just humanity and transparency and have a moral compass, right? I mean, it's nobody likes firing anybody. Nobody likes getting fired. Nobody likes leaving the L out of public. It's unless you're super weird, that isn't done on purpose. It's really give people a little bit of room to breathe and mop up gracefully and, carry on. Occasionally, like the Black Friday story, there are organizations and people within those organizations that are just wired a different way, and they're never going to be transparent and have a moral compass and so on. And so then you just choose, do I want to be anywhere near these people or not? And that's a whole other movie. But yeah, I think the human endeavor is fraught with error. So we just have to accommodate that. It's the reality of life.
Well, thank you both. Second time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming back on. Happy Halloween.
Pleasure. Always.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, spookiness. Yeah.
If you'd like to send a message to either one of my guests, Jolene Ondrik or Doug Lacombe, we have their emails in the show notes, along with their website and a link to the previous episodes that they've been on here with Stories and Strategies. Stories and Strategies is a co-production of JGR Communications and Stories and Strategies podcasts. If you like this episode, would you do us a favor and tell one friend? Thanks for listening.